it's 2. We should start. So, hello everybody, and a very warm welcome here at the EPC, online as well as offline, and welcome, to this EPC policy dialogue, the European single market, a driver of the Green Deal. My name is Philipp Lausberg. I'm a policy analyst at the Europe's Political Economy program here at the EPC. And the European single market is a cornerstone of the EU's economic prosperity, with its 4 freedoms, including the free movement of goods, capital, services, and labor. The single market has increased competition, labor specialization, and economies of scale, and pushed the efficiency and economic integration of the EU to unprecedented levels. Now, at its 30th anniversary, a reinforcement of the single market has gained new currency and new urgency, particularly to push ahead one of the EU's most important projects, the Green Deal. In 2019, the EU pledged to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050, and by 2030, it wants to have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% to 1990 compared to 1990 levels. The Green Deal has also entails other ambitious goals, such as protecting biodiversity and building a circular economy. All this has gained additional urgency in suit of the COVID crisis and Russia's unprovoked attack of Ukraine, which has caused major supply chain disruptions. Gaining greater strategic autonomy has become a top goal, and it is closely aligned with the objectives of the Green Deal, such as scaling up renewables and building a circular economy. Similarly, large industrial policy programs in other countries, such as the US and China, have increased the pressure on the EU to accelerate the development of green industry. The Commission's Green Deal Industrial Plan and the recently proposed Net Zero Industry Act aim at boosting green industry in Europe. But what is the role of the single market, and what should be the role of the single market, and particularly the single market for goods in all of this? And how can it help to make, on the one hand, European industry greener, but at the same time also support the development of green industry? So these are the overarching questions we're dealing with today in this policy dialogue. And to do so, we have assembled a very distinguished panel that I now have the pleasure to introduce to you. So to my right is sitting Hubert Gambs, Deputy Director General in DG GROW of the European Commission. Next to him, we have Daniel Wennick, Policy Director at Orgalim, Europe's technology industries. And then joining us online from Poland, we have Eva Zielińska from CENELEC, the European standard setter, and Stéphane Arditi from the European Environmental Bureau. So thank you all to you for making it to the panel. We're very happy to have you here. I would now start to give the floor to Hubert Gambs, and by asking him the question, how has the single market so far contributed to achieving the objectives of the European Green Deal? What kind of legislation has been put in place? How has it performed, and where are the gaps? And what are the plans for the Commission going forward in making the single market a major driver for the Green Deal, also in light of the European parliamentary elections next year? Please, the floor is yours.
This helps. Thank you very much, Philipp, for inviting me, and good afternoon to everybody. I'd like to start to first tell us, of course, we are celebrating this year an anniversary. It's 30 years of the single market, and I think it is fair to say that the single market has benefited. It has benefited enterprises, consumers, investors, employees, and many other stakeholders. It has benefited in economic terms, in social terms, and also in geopolitical terms. And I think, at 30 nobody's perfect. Also, the single market is not perfect. But we have a strong single market, in particular also if we compare with other parts of the world. We are the world's most integrated market, with 440 million consumers, with 23 million businesses. And altogether, this accounts for 15% of the GDP. And also, economic studies show us that without the single market, we would be much worse off. We would have a GDP in the European Union that would be 8 to 9% less, and that's substantial. The single market also helps us to be more innovative. The single market helps us to reduce the gap with the US in this field, but also, for example, we have passed out Japan when we look at the European Innovation Scoreboard that compares world regions in that respect. The single market is also a substantial pull factor. It's attractive for companies to come here, to sell their goods here, to offer their services here. And the crisis, COVID crisis first, then of course the Russian war against Ukraine, they have shown also that we need an EU economy that is more resilient. And for that, we need a functioning single market, because this gives us possibilities to be more resilient. We have to adapt, of course, also the single market. How can the single market help the European Green Deal to come into fruition? It's also clear, I think, that the European Green Deal cannot happen without industry. It cannot happen without innovative companies. We need, of course, their contribution to make the European Green Deal work. And what we have also seen, with the energy crisis, we need energy markets that function, because affordable energy is key to companies. We have worked there in our trend toward more green, more renewable sources of energy. We're thinking about an electricity market design that don't make us so dependent of market fluctuations. An example where we have regulation that helped us to become, to achieve the objectives of the Green Deal is the batteries regulation that was, last December, political agreement among the co-legislators was found. And it shows a new way of legislating, to have a lifetime approach, very important, to achieve the objectives of the Green Deal, to have legislation that really drives sustainability by setting EU-wide requirements, environmental requirements, to make sure that also for the production of these batteries, we source the raw materials sustainably. We try to do that and also decrease our dependency on other world regions with the Critical Raw Materials Act that we proposed last month. You mentioned the Net Zero Industry Act, which is another instrument where we look at, not how we deploy more technologies to have more renewable sources of energy, but how do we produce what we need for these renewable energies, be it solar cells, be it windmills, be it heat pumps. And this is an industry where we need to have production also here. Of course, we have to see how can we make that more attractive, but these are our key elements to achieve the Green Deal, and to have the single market really as a driver of European Green Deal. That's, I would say, for a start, and I'm sure we can touch on many subjects in the discussion.
Thanks very much for these introductory remarks and the insights in the Commission's view on the single market and the Green Deal. I would like to now turn to Daniel to present us the views of European industry on the single market and its opportunities in pushing the Green Deal, where there are the opportunities, where are the obstacles for industry, and how we can achieve together a greener future with industry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this panel. So I represent Orgalim, so it's Europe's technology industries. Indirectly, we have 770,000 member companies with 11 employees, with a turnover of 2,500 billion euros per year. So it's very much a cross-sectoral scope that we have in our organization, and we cover metal technology, electrical engineering, and also mechanical engineering amongst our membership. And we are very happy to celebrate Single Market's 30th anniversary. We believe it's very important opportunity for us to take stock of the developments over the years, and fully agree with many of the points raised by Mr. Gambs. Also, of course, Single Market strength lay in its 450 million consumers and businesses that have access to equal regulation in many areas, but there's also things left to be done. I would say that this single market then gives us a leverage in negotiating free trade agreements with other markets such as Mercosur, Australia, or the most important trading partner for the European Union, which is the US. And having this common regulatory regime enables us to then leverage our position and negotiate better trade agreements than the member states of the European Union would do on its own. We, of course, feel that there should be more advancement in these areas regarding free trade agreements. And we believe that will also make the single market a lot stronger. And Europe's manufacturing base is very strong. It's one of our key advantages in Europe. And our members have most of the solutions to reaching the net zero society. So we're happy to see much of the legislation coming out, and our members will come up with the solutions. But taking away more of the barriers that are currently in the market, and I would say for the most part, having as much as possible a technology neutral approach would benefit Europe and reaching the net zero goal a lot quicker. We feel a need to sort of put competitiveness back in the discussion. There is now a suggestion on having a competitiveness check, although I feel we need to point out that there was no competitiveness check for the competitiveness package that came out with the Net Zero Industry Act and all the other legislation connected to it. There's also missing impact assessment, although there are staff working documents with analysis close to what would be an impact assessment. We missed that, and we believe this is important. There's always a risk to rush things. You need to send the right political signals, and there is a lot of legislation that's not implemented yet. So in many areas in a single market, in general, we would say to go back and say that focus on implementing current legislation and making it work before embarking on new journeys and with new legislation. Sometimes it's just too much of political pressure to wait, but I think that the Commission historically has been good at taking more of the long-term view. And the long-term view is very important if we want to get the right investments in Europe to have more energy supply and for energy efficiency. We're happy to see that in the Net Zero Industry Act, at least there was a possibility to open up for more energy efficiency, because we believe in very much so in viewing both sides of this energy crisis, both looking at energy supply, but also looking at energy efficiency. And the more advanced manufacturing that the more we are advanced in our manufacturing, the more energy efficient we are, the more resource efficient we are, the more operational efficiency we have. And this also operational efficiency makes also the production more energy efficient. So focusing on advanced manufacturing and focusing on both the supply side and energy efficiency side is something we saw it coming into the Net Zero Industry Act a little bit at the end, but we would like to see even more of that, and also more of a technology-specific, technology-neutral approach, such as in the EU ETS. We think that the EU ETS is a great legislation and it's very dynamic. You cannot view EU ETS as a fixed sort of suggested targets. The targets have shifted many times. There's free allocation also. There's also the possibility to connect the EU ETS to other trading systems. The ETS can be as ambitious as we want it to be, and the ETS is a clear technology neutral and market-based approach, which also is very good for creating a good investment climate. I think, especially in the energy sector, one of the main key challenges is that legislation changes too often. So as an investor, you don't know what will be the next technology of future. In some countries decide this technology is no longer okay. In another country, it might be another technology that's no longer okay. And then as an investor, you're wondering, what should we invest in? And that's not the only area where it's in this manner, but in general, I would say getting a long-term view for investors is very, very, very important. Maybe I'll leave it there and for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for these insights into the needs and the interests of the industry, and how also green goals and competitiveness can be the two sides of the same coin, I think, but also the importance of long-term planning and investor trust when it comes to knowing in the long term what to expect. I'm now turning to Stéphane Arditi, who will tell us a little bit about this perspective of the European Environmental Bureau and where he sees the priorities in how we can make the single market support the Green Deal.
Sorry,
Stéphane?
I was muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
No
Hello,
worries.
everyone. Hope you well. Thank you very much to EPC for inviting the EB, and I'm really glad we can be part of this panel. I'm in fact replacing my colleague Faustine, who unfortunately had a medical appointment. She's more into food when I'm more into, the circular economy and industry policy. But I will also try as far as possible to cover like the food aspect during the discussion. But to answer the question, I think Mr. Gambs make it clear that there has been some, I would say, positive outcome of the single market, and not only for the mass market creation for the industry, but also bringing clear benefits for citizens. Example, traveling and working freely in EU, no roaming charge on mobile phone, studying in different countries. So just to name a few. However, I think we are in a different perspective now. We've now crossed 6 planet boundaries. And in a way, the European single market can help if it takes this seriously. And at the moment, I would say that we are a bit with this tension between people saying, wow, there is the war in Ukraine, we have suffered the COVID, so it's time to stop and to slow down. And the science telling us, sorry, there is an emergency. We really need systemic change if we want to ensure a livable and inclusive future. And we are in this tension at the moment. And I would say that for me, the way the EU single market can help is by saying, I acknowledge this tension, but we will perform toward a sustainable future because there is no other way forward. And I think this is very important to hear, because if you allow, some of the conservative voice, pretending to protect the EU industry, and we can discuss that, plus some nationalist voice in some member state, you've got the perfect recipe for a total disaster. So I think if we really want the single market to contribute to achieving the objective of the EU Green Deal and help the industry to kind of prosper and thrive in that direction, we need to address, this ambition and resist all voices saying it's time to slow down, it's time to stop. And I'm sorry to kind of challenge a bit Mr. Wennick. No, it's not enough to ensure the implementation of existing policy. As Mr. Gambs said, with the battery directive, we try to set new precedent in the way we can place goods on the market. The second thing, we need to make sure that the EU single market is identified as something positive by citizens. Because in many, many countries, when you speak about the EU single market, it's constraining, it's normalizing, it's completely impersonal, it's destroying local business. That's the narrative we hear. I don't say if they're true or not, but that's what we hear. So another key condition is that the people in Europe understand why the single market can really deliver for them. And with that regard, I'd like to introduce things that hopefully will be discussed during the debate. First, it might be time to change paradigm in the way we see policy and industry working together. At the moment, we still too often hear the industry say, please, less regulation, give us the free way to act, to innovate and things like this. I challenge this. I say, the best way for the EU industry to compete is more policy, more regulation, more market drivers. And I really like that we can discuss that. The second thing is that if we want to have a EU single market that can deliver for the Green Deal, we also need to create a real level playing field for the good entering the EU. And at the moment, you know, for those who know about the eco-design for sustainable product regulation, for example, they clearly create, you know, a loophole with online sales platform, which after COVID has grown in terms of impact and the number of goods they place on the market. And that's why EEB, with 33 industry from different sectors, have issued a statement to say, no, online sales platform need to have the same responsibility, the same liability as any other placer on the market. And it's time to really close this loophole. Just to give an example, we've investigated a special case of what we call skin lightening cream, which are supposed to not contain mercury, because mercury is really nasty heavy metals that we try to get rid of in the EU. And on 21 suspicious, you know, product, we've detected 19 of them, 19 out of 21, with a mercury contents higher than 1 ppl, all introduced through online sale platform. And we wonder if we can still compete as long as, in a way, the competition is completely distorted by online sales platform. I will stop there, but really, I'd like that we discuss this new relation between industry and policy to best deliver and really creating the level playing field in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these very interesting insights from the European Environmental Bureau, and also for highlighting, on the one hand, you know, the gaps and the inefficiencies in the single market, where we don't have a level playing field yet, where, for example, you say online platforms, but I'm sure there's a lot of other areas where there's still barriers that doesn't allow for equal access to the market, doesn't allow for free competition. And then on the other hand, of course, the issue of how can we combine growth with sustainability? How can we, or is it even possible? And I think these are very important questions that you've just raised, and I'm sure we will go much more in depth on that also in a dialogue with our other panelists. But before we go there, I would like to also let Eva Zielińska from CENELEC speak. And I think as a European standard setter, she of course has a very inside view on what is really the core of the single market, namely common standards and creating a level playing field in goods. And I think it will be very interesting to hear from her what her views are on how the single market can push the Green Deal.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. And I will also join the thanks of my colleagues for inviting me and giving me possibility of speaking during this panel. I represent here CENELEC, but I'm also, let's say, allowed to speak on behalf of the CENELEC sister organization, which is CEN, which are CEN and CENELEC are two of the official European standardization organizations. And indeed, our discussion is very timely because we celebrate this 30 years of the single market. And I'd like to say one important, but I think everyone is aware of that, but I have to say that I have no choice coming from the standardization organization. European standards play a strategic role in making sure that single market has what it takes to succeed in the green transition. Indeed, standards are what makes the single market possible. They provide clarity and consistency for the trade of goods and services across Europe, ensure that they meet the highest standards of quality and safety, and help disseminate new technologies and innovations. To say in few words, standards build trust in the single market. The foundations for the success of the past 30 years lie in the uniqueness of the European standardization system. Standards development follows a voluntary, transparent, and market-based process that relies on the best experts from all around Europe and aims to engage as many stakeholders as possible. This helps ensure that our standards not only work well, but are also very inclusive. And it is thanks to these values that standards are well positioned to help the green transition succeed. Among other things, standardization plays an important role in meeting EU targets by promoting best practices, improving energy efficiency, and providing tools to optimize installations and systems. In particular, there are some specific areas in which I believe standards can prove a particularly efficient tool to power Europe's transition. And here are some examples. First of all, standards provide clarity. They offer clear definitions and one single vocabulary, thus reducing transaction costs. This has been a key for the single market as it helped dismantle barriers to trade. And it maintains its relevance today as we strive to implement green policies. Having one single set of definitions and measurements for all of Europe and all sectors can facilitate compliance and buy-in, as the monitoring of emission limits for vehicles has shown. And secondly, standards act as a bridge between policies and the world of business. Indeed, many companies in Europe want to contribute to the green transformation. Sometimes they might find legislative requirements too burdensome. Standards can help translate those requirements into actionable guidelines. Standards on the management of energy use or of carbon emissions can be used as tools by companies to gradually improve their performances and at the same implement European legislation. So quite a useful tool. Thirdly, with energy efficiency now being a priority for the EU's decision makers, standards can help power the digitalization of our energy systems. Standards support the implementation of new services for consumers while reducing the operational costs of grid management. One of the most interesting developments on this regard is the digital twin, which allows manufacturers to predict different outcomes and avoid potential failure based on data, thus saving time and reducing cost. And finally, standards also help scale up innovations in clean tech. By reducing cost and ensuring interoperability, they can help integrate new emerging technologies for decarbonation and new fuel sources, for example, hydrogen and biofuels, in existing energy production systems. To speak more generally, CEN and CENELEC have long been committed to helping Europe achieve its green objectives. And based on our beliefs and values, we have matured a long experience of working with industry partners, with European Commission, and also with other stakeholders to develop green standards on a variety of sectors. And for example, here I can mention the standards on work on the sustainability of construction works, on gas infrastructure, on eco-design and eco-labelings, hydrogen, etc. And all those examples testifies the commitment of CEN and CENELEC to the Green Deal. And it also gives some reasons for optimism on the capacity of the single market powered by standards to respond to the challenges it faces. Of course, needs a lot of improvements. I mean, more needs to be done in the next year. However, in the next years, with the implementation of important policy files like Net Zero Industrial Act or Critical Raw Material Acts, but this is, I believe, it is achievable. And on this, I would like to share one key message. A coherent, efficient, and a strong public-private partnership between standardizers, stakeholders, and EU institutions is instrumental for the health of the single market. And with that, I would like to finish my first intervention, and very much looking forward to the further discussions with the panelists, but also with the participants of the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva, for really highlighting the importance that norms play in the single market, and how they can make companies adopt greener products, develop greener products. And I would like now to of course open the discussion, and maybe we continue talking about norms, talking about regulations that are supposed to improve the green impact of industry. And I'm turning to Daniel. We have seen a lot of efforts to increase due diligence, to increase, for example, we have the green taxonomy. How do you think that, how has that impacted industry? Do you think that has made an impact in really increasing the greenness of products that are put out? But and do you think that this can be combined with competitiveness criteria? And do you think this is also is this enough, taking into account also what Stéphane said before, to achieve the Green Deal? So Daniel.
Regarding the taxonomy, I think it will for sure have an impact. I think it's maybe too early to tell because it's very new legislation coming into play here. So it depends a bit on to what extent it's going to be picked up by investors, banks, and also nationally. But for sure, this will have an impact. So the taxonomy is very, very important for our industry, and we're very keen on having key enabling technologies to achieve the net zero transition included, which is not always the case. And we can see that on different legislation coming out from the EU, it's not necessarily coherent what is defined as net zero and not. And you have the Net Zero Industry Act, and it's not coherent with the taxonomy, which is something that we are pushing for. But definitely taxonomy is one sort of way of going forward, and it could potentially be a good way of creating sort of a long-term good investment climate for these kind of investments in Europe. But again, I think going back to the point about the number of different legislation in the same area, I think my main point is sort of to at least see what impact legislation has before you start changing it, because there's legislation that sometimes you have new legislation coming out even before the full implementation is finished. And I think you need to have a process where you sort of say, did it work or not? If you start changing things before you even implemented it, then you're based on what? It's then based on intuition that you feel that new legislation is needed. So for that sense, at least for the first parts of the taxonomy, let's see how that works out and do an analysis. But there are still delegated acts that are not out yet, so it's still very, very early. I mean, you have to have the delegated acts out, and then it needs to be picked up also. And after even being presented by the Commission, of course, there's also a scrutiny period. Even if it's a delegated act, there's a scrutiny period for both the Parliament and the Council. So there are delegated acts that should have come out last week, end of last week. If they did in the end, I didn't have time to check that, but we're sort of still in the process there. Maybe I would also say something that we have not mentioned, but this is a very concerning trend that we see at the moment. It's regarding Data Act and how data is handled. There's so much legislation coming out currently. It's a Data Act. It's a Single Market Emergency Instrument. It's in European Chips Act. It's also an eco design, how data is going to be treated. And data secrets are not respected in all of these legislations. So I think everybody in this room has bought a Coca-Cola at some point. How many know the recipe for Coca-Cola? No one, of course, it's a trade secret. But with data legislation, much of the direction is going towards you buy your product, the data generated by the product you own. And it's sort of handing out parts of trade secrets on a silver plate to other competitors who are producing similar products in other parts of the world. So this is something that we're very worried about, and it comes in all kinds of different legislation, and it's sort of similar, but it's tweaked a bit differently in all these legislations I mentioned. So that's another example. I think I leave it there and pass the floor to other speakers. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think this issue about leakage of product secrets and so on, I've heard it recently from some Korean business association as well. I don't know, is that something the Commission is looking into? What kind of solutions would you propose? And yeah, Hubert, maybe you can reply on that.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to, because the protection of trade secrets, of intellectual property, this is of course a key feature of our legislation, and we are fully aware that we have to protect that. This is, this is property of our companies that they should use to be competitive, and that they have every right to make sure that is protected. And I would say in the legislative act, we are very aware that an exchange of information does not include trade secrets. It has to be distinguished whether, for example, we would like to share companies to share confidential information with public authorities. And an example that I want to mention is the Single Market Emergency Instrument that we suggested. And the objective is, we don't want to come again in a situation like in spring 2020 with COVID, where all the member states made the single market stop working. The borders went down. There was no free movement of goods anymore, no free movement of persons anymore, and we paid a price for that, because this was, the virus was not stopped. What was stopped were supply chains were interrupted, so companies were brought into even more problems than they already faced due to COVID. Now, in the Single Market Emergency Instrument, we also foresee, we envisage the possibility that member states have to act together. We have to bring member states together, and we need also to work together with industry. And we need to design the right reactions to a single market crisis situation. We need to, of course, also some information, including information from companies. I know this is very sensitive, but I think you have to also trust that, for example, public institutions, the Commission, is able to deal with trade secrets and keep them secret. We do it in competition, for example, since many, many years, and also in other areas. So we are very much aware that this is an issue where we have to reassure companies. Yeah. I'd like to react to a few aspects that came up also from the other panelists. The first one is regulation. In the European Union, we work with regulation as a key instrument to create the European Green Deal, to create the single market. We base these projects, if I can call them like that, we base them on regulation. And of course, as President Ursula von der Leyen said, one pillar of the Green Deal industrial plan is to get the regulatory framework right. Now you can discuss whether we manage that all the time, in particular from different perspectives. You know, some we're in general criticized that our legislation doesn't go far enough to protect the environment. We are criticized that it puts too much burdens on companies. And it is, you know, in this field that we are trying to maneuver to get the balance right. I fully agree with Daniel that it is important to implement the legislation that we have, you know, and we have to make sure, because it doesn't make sense to regulate, to have rules if they're not respected. So enforcing the existing rules is key. Would they be enough? Would they have been enough to achieve our objective that we put ourselves, or the several objectives that we put in the European Green Deal? No. That's why we put, of course, additional regulation on the table. But, you know, when we design regulation, we have to get this balance right that Stéphane also mentioned between growth and sustainability. You know, sustainability, I think we have to, and our companies have very much taken it as an opportunity also. You know, we want to be front runner in being innovative in the field of sustainability. But that doesn't mean that we can only focus on that. We also have to keep in mind, when we do regulation in this area, that it is regulation that is implementable, that companies and other stakeholders can actually respect, that it works in practice, and that they still, you know, are not pushed outside of the union, that they still see that it's still possible to have economic activities, industrial activities in the European Union, because this is necessary for employment reasons, for reasons that we are not even more dependent, as we are already, you know, in many areas on raw materials, for example, from China, on electricity, on gas and oil from Russia. You know, I would say we learned it the hard way, and we have to make sure that we're not caught again in the same situation. But so we need to keep, when we legislate, or when we propose the Commission, and then when European Parliament and member states legislate, we have to keep in mind, of course, the objective that we want, you know, this legislation to help more sustainability, but it also to do it in a way that we can keep economic activities in the European Union. That's for the moment.
Thank you very much, Hubert. I now turn to Stéphane, but before I do that, I also would like to tell everyone who's online, you can ask questions. You can, you know, type them in. We already have some, and in the QA session later on, your questions have a great chance to also be considered. But yeah, now I turn to Stéphane. I've seen that you might not have been, you know, you might not agree with everything that has been said now, but quite concretely, you know, when it comes to the concerns of industry, but also the, you know, the sort of balancing act that Hubert Gambs just outlined between, you know, finding, you know, the greenest possible solution, but also juggling that, so to say, with competitiveness, and maybe also industry secret criteria. How do you see the way forward? What's your point of this?
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to react to something. I mean, you can choose the growth narrative. For EB, we've said that we are more growth agnostic. That means that maybe pursuing growth per se as an objective has put us on the wrong tracks. So let's try to address the science-based challenge we have and see if growth can happen or not with this. But I would say that change the priority. But I don't want to play on semantics, because it's not the object of today. First, really on trade secrets. I'm sorry, because we've heard the same argument for the last 3 decades, okay? So just 2 things for everyone listening, okay? I have myself worked in the automotive industry where there is a lot of innovation. Believe me, it is not through the consumer that trade secrets are, you know, betrayed. It's just because when we wanted to know the performance of a Japanese car in terms of reliability, we were buying a car, we were completely dismantling a car and analyzing how it works. The trade secrets are not written by the level of information forwarded to consumer. They are written by the competitive industry that is interested to know. Second thing, this morning, and I advise really the industry to meet those very clever people working on digital product passport, because in every initiative, this is one of the main things they have, protecting trade secret. And with the decentralized distributional approach that the European Commission is promoting through the digital product passport, the data is kept with the provider of the data, that is the industry. And we've got different technology that can really protect the trade secret. So I advise the people, in a way, stop repeating always the same thing, but really investigate, the real clever solution that the digital product passport can put forward to protect trade secret while enhancing enforcement. Second thing, I think I'd like to rebound on this regulation and kind of industry development. Let's take the example of the energy-intensive industry. Energy-intensive industry might be in a complicated situation to decarbonize. Okay, so let's see, how do we want to preserve an energy-intensive industry in Europe? Because outsourcing will be even worse for the climate. We have absolutely no doubt. Is it by deregulating, or in contrary, is it by saying there are certain standards that you manufacturers need to respect? At the moment, the main issue they suffer from is that industry based in other countries do not necessarily have to meet the same standard. So of course, they fear that if you increase the stringency of those standards, you will put them at risk in terms of cost competition versus imported product. But if we build on the Eco-Design Directive, and I just remind for those who do not know, please consult the Eco-Design Impact Accounting official report by the European Commission for years. This policy not only has delivered tremendously for energy efficiency, for saving on energy bills of consumer, but has created huge opportunity for your industry, and also created some potential for job creation. So it is through this kind of very binding policy that we've clearly secured, also the EU industry. But let me bring back just to explore this with Daniel, because I'd like to have his thought on this. Daniel, today, only the EU industry is covered by ID, but all products imported in EU are covered by Eco-Design. Today, the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation offers to also consider the environmental footprint and the carbon footprint of product entering the EU, and could possibly set some minimum information with regard the environmental footprint in terms of information, but also in terms of performance. Why don't we work together so that when we investigate product covered by Eco-Design, such as steel, such as aluminum, that may potentially what we call intermediary product, we also set the bar so that product to enter the EU market would have to align through their environmental footprint with the BREF, sorry for those not familiar, so the best available technology reference document that is associated with the Industrial Emission Directive. So suddenly, instead of less regulation, less rules, we create more rules by combining smartly two powerful policy and create a level playing field. And why is it interesting for the EU industry? Because instead of having the competitiveness in terms of how can I compete with other countries not respecting the same environmental and social standard, I say I secure that the single market is a safe space for your industry, because through the level playing field with this BREF standard, with this Eco-Design standard, I ensure that only those performing as good as what is required to the EU industry can place their product on the market. This is for me the way forward. This is the new way of thinking a competitiveness that is aligned with sustainability instead of opposing environmental and social standard to sustainability. So really, I invite the industry to explore this way forward and in a way, stop having always the same old-fashioned thinking that your regulation is not good for the industry, standard setting is not good for the industry. This is really a fundamental point. And I take that as an opportunity to address two or three questions in the chat. First, for those who say, would GPP, Green Public Procurement, should be mobilized? Absolutely. And we are in favor of setting mandatory green public procurement in the individual directive, and also to revise the public procurement directive so that the sustainable purchasing procurement will be the default choice. And that also addresses another question about SMEs suffering from new state aids rule that can be designed at national level. We are also in favor in this Net Zero Industry Act to create, clear condition, including social standard, including workers' rights standard, to allow fiscal and financial support to decarbonize industry. And again, if we set those standards, that means that the SMEs do not suffer from an unfair competition, but they know the rule. And if they respect these rules in terms of environmental and social standard, they have all their place in this framework. So that's also something very important. And that's how the single market can play, because if the Net Zero Industry Act say, these are the clear standards that any national state head need to respect, then we have something that would also be reinforcing the single market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stéphane. I think Hubert just wants to come in.
Stéphane, could I ask you a question? When you say social standards for companies under the Net Zero Industry Act producing in the EU, or do you mean this, products coming in that they would have to respect the social standards? I just would like to understand your point there.
For me, it's the two, if I may. Through the corporate sustainability and due diligence directive, we try to set the social standard are an integrated as a fundamental part of how we want to trade, how we want to make business. And we try to say those not respecting this social and environmental standard, I'm sorry, are not allowed to place their product on the market. That's to address the unfair competition between, those producing outside Europe and those producing inside Europe. Second thing, when you say for the EU manufacturers, we are in favor in case there is some state aid, in case there is public money invested to support green industry, that this green industry not only perform on decarbonization, but also perform on decarbonization and respect social and workers' rights standard. And that's why we think that we could have an additional criteria that said, if you want to support this green technology that probably needs support in the beginning, please make sure that they also respect the social standards. So for me, it's not either or, is always trying to maintain the highest standard. And I repeat, not to make it more complicated for your industry, but to make it more complicated for those competing on unfair rules, I would say, with the EU industry, not possible anymore. Let's try to go to the highest, I would say, performance standard as required by science, not environmentalist, not idealist, but science and scientific community, and make sure that we create the level playing field so that the EU industry not unfairly suffer from the competition from imported goods.
Thank you very much, Stéphane. Some very interesting points here on product passports, but also the idea that, if I understood you right, that the competitiveness is actually increased by having higher standards, because then you don't get lower quality or products that don't comply with these standards in the EU first and become a competitive threat. So I think it's an interesting argument. Also, when we look at the CBAM, I think that is really very much going into that direction. What effect that has on trade and on other countries, I think that's a discussion we can also have at another point. But I think now I'm also, I would like to turn to Daniel, because Stéphane has really also directed a lot of his comments towards Daniel, and I now give him an opportunity to come back.
Thank you very much. I think Stéphane is really onto something here, or several things. So we do agree with that. The way trade secrets are handled in the digital product passport, it could be a model to follow for other legislation. It's very far from how trade secrets are handled in the Data Act, for example. And SME, also we see several other issues, but you should differentiate with what trade secrets that customers access and what public authorities access. Of course, there's a huge difference there. But in the Data Act, we're actually talking about private customers very easily getting access to information that otherwise, as Stéphane pointed out, maybe you would need to buy the car, dismantle it, etc. Now we're talking about possibilities to get that information just directly through the data that it generates and online, and then you could sell it back to the company because the customer automatically owns this data even. And it's about, could be, for example, how different sensors work together, and if you can read them all together, you get a feeling of how different motors are developed, etc. Could go deep into different types of examples here, but I think Stéphane is really onto something with the DPP. Yeah, it looks better there in much of the other legislation, so we'd be happier with that than much of the other things being proposed. Standards is, of course, something that's very important for us, and we work very closely with CENELEC and other standard setting bodies. Industry is very, very active here, and we strongly believe in the abilities of standards, and would like to, as much as possible, increase participation in European standards to other close partnering countries, such as Switzerland, for example. But and legislation is definitely dynamic. There's the EU ETS legislation that I mentioned at the beginning. It's a technology-friendly, market-based legislation that can be as ambitious as we want it to be. Stéphane mentioned maybe degrowth or sufficiency paradigm. If that's where the EB is, I mean, there's a sufficiency paradigm way of handling the ETS. You can also do it in the ecological modernization, or also in the more Prometheanism way, sort of more going into the sort of growth before all. So there's several ways. All this legislation is dynamic, and the point is not to not come with new legislation. The point is very much, and I feel that Hubert and I are aligned there, that at least implement and analyze before you come up with new legislation. That's what the point is about. And I saw there was a question also from the panel about public procurement in the Net Zero Industry Act. Is that, if it's in a Net Zero Industry Act, I would say we're a bit worried about the Article 19 on public procurement in the Net Zero Industry Act, because it says that if a product is produced in Europe, it could cost 10% more, basically. And if this legislation was about decreasing inflation, I don't see how you decrease inflation by accepting that the product is 10% more expensive because it's produced in Europe. So then it's about something else. And we see that paragraph typically worrying. But yeah, that's it on that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think you're raising there another issue, the idea whether resilience is more important than competition. But I think before I would also turn to Eva, and we would like to also hear her points of view on the issue of product passports and how safe they are. Since you are in the middle of the making norms, so I think you probably can tell us best how well our industry secrets are kept, and how you see this whole debate that's been unfolding between the other panelists so far.
Well, before I will answer your questions, I want your question. I would also like to reflect a little bit about the discussion we already could hear, because I fully agree that we need to regulate. We need good regulations, but at the same time, I think that it's extremely important to keep the balance between what needs to be regulated and needs to be defined in a law, and what can be defined in the voluntary standards, which for sure can be used as a tool supporting implementation of law in Europe. I mean, supporting as a soft tool, giving the presumption of conformity with legal requirements. And this is something what is happening in Europe right now, especially in the single market. This is one of the strengths of the European single market, that we have this option of the presumption of conformity. And this is something we used to call new approach, and now we call this new legal framework, when we have regulations and everything what relates to the safety is written down in regulations, and the standards, harmonized standards, the special type, especially recognized standards, they give presumption of conformity. And I believe that it's extremely important to keep this balance and not over-regulate. And I'm also speaking, from my experience from the past, coming from the country, with the past where everything was regulated and over-regulated even, and it doesn't help to the economy of Poland to be more competitive in comparison to other European countries. I'm of course speaking about the past, like more than 30 years ago in Poland. And of course, when we have these regulations, we have to be sure, and this was also raised by Stéphane, I think, the important is consistency of this regulation. And, this is also important to keep this consistency, when we refer in the legislation to standardization. And I would like to give an example of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. Because it shows a lack of alignment, and this may cause duplications and increase uncertainties for business. In fact, so this is my request for higher consistency and in cooperation. And of course, Stéphane also mentioned, about this, how the standards should be used somehow. The high standards should be used to protect European industry versus non-European industry. Well, I strongly believe that this voluntary standardization system should be built in this way, that it improves competitiveness of the industry and allow for the higher competitiveness and for it. But we also have to remember, because he mentioned that the higher standards, etc., and I think it's worth to highlight that European standards organizations, we closely cooperate with the international ones. Of course, in Europe, which is extremely important, we have the model of unique standard accepted in every member of CEN and CENELEC. So in fact means more than 27 EU countries. It's EU, EFTA, and also other countries, candidate EU countries, but also UK at the moment. So we have this unique model when one standards exist in every European country and can be applied. But on the other hand, we closely cooperate with the international standards organizations like ISO and IEC. And a lot of European standards is developed in cooperation with those organizations. Let's put that in these words. We have the Vienna and Frankfurt agreements. And especially for the electrotechnical sector, when we cooperate very closely under the Frankfurt Agreement with IEC, more than 80% of European standards is identical with the international ones. And I strongly believe that thanks to that, European electrotechnical industry is competitive and at the global market. And coming to your question about the digital product passports, of course, because of course standardization comes there where there is a need. I mean, if there are interested parties in development specific standards, we start the work. Those interested parties can be different, but in this regard, sometimes it is related to the reaction of the European standards organizations on a specific request from the Commission. In case of digital product passports, we are, let's say, preparing for the development of standards in this regard, and specific groups like CENELEC ETSI, so also covering the third European standards organizations on smart manufacturing, coordinates activities relating to digitalization of industrial value chains. So this is the first step. We try to assess whether there is a need for standardization, I mean, or for developing new standards, because I think it's also important to remember that if the standards exist on specific topics, we should rather update them and to make them to present the state of the art than to develop the new ones. So we set up specific groups to assess the standardization's need in this regard. If there is a need, of course, all interested parties can participate in the development of standards. As I mentioned in my introductory words, the standardization system is a very inclusive one. Of course, it is done through the national delegation principle, which again, this is the huge advantage also for SMEs, that you can participate in the standardization at the national level, but at the same time, you are giving input to the European standards. So this is the option that every interested parties coming from the be it industry, societal stakeholders, other interested parties as well, they can bring their knowledge to develop the best possible standards that can be used in every European country. And I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much for the very detailed insights into the making of norms and how they can make a difference. I would like also now to turn to a different question. Basically, yeah, we have the Green Deal industrial plan with very ambitious goals. There's one whole section dedicated to access to finance. And so far we're looking at mainly, or one big chunk of that finance is state aids. So how can we square that with the green, with the single market? And what are the dangers, you think, or should we indeed rely more on state aids? Maybe we start with Stéphane. What are your views on that? Or how should we finance the green transition? And how can we make sure this doesn't endanger the green, the single market?
Thank you very much. Before jumping to your question, I just want to clarify something. We are not here to protect the EU industry. We are here, and I repeat, that's what we achieve through eco-design. We have not protected the EU industry. We've been beneficial to the EU industry because by setting those standards, we also ensured that EU industry respecting the IS standard can have a space, a safe space. In contrary to CBAM that has been blamed for protecting the EU industry, we are not to close boundaries. We are super happy that international standard can align with the EU standard. This is extremely important because we think that we can still benefit the EU industry without closing the border. I think it's super important. So I just wanted to clarify this point. When it comes to state aid, I think I've tried to already answer a little bit because I saw the question in the Q&A. I think, and this is really for me a matter of single market. There is one big risk is that every national authority decide what they can state aid because this is what they think is their industry. I'm sorry, I'm French. I can tell you for those in France, you know, nuclear industry is really in that type of narrative. You know, let France support the nuclear industry, even if at EU level there is no consensus, so it might not be the case. And I just took this example because I know, but I guess that in Germany, a lot of people will say, let's support the car manufacturing industry. I'm not aware, but I imagine that they can have this. So I think here there is a very clear role of the single market, and I think it should be made more clear in the Net Zero Industrial Act, or is to set the condition to allow, state aids in addition to those existing already. And as part of those conditions, I identify at least two of them. Proven record of performance, that means not diluting the scarce money we can have into very innovative, not proven technology. It does not mean that those should not be helped, but not necessarily in that framework, which is an emergency framework where we have to bet on the proven technology. Second thing, trying also to make sure that this can be accepted by the EU population and the EU citizen by making sure that some form of social criteria are also integrated. I just say, for those who have to, like me, be on a daily basis confronted to opposition by people to even renewable energy park, or to other type of big investment because they fear that this will kind of completely transform their landscape that will not benefit them. I think it's also super important that we have projects that can be owned by the local population where those projects will take place. And this is what I call trying to also have some form of social standard, making sure that the project also benefit the local population so that they can feel it's also their project, is not only something that is imposed from elsewhere to them. And this is something I think very important, like linking to the first point I made. Today, the single market, if you have a survey, I'm sure that for most of the people, it's something which is super abstract, imposing on them a lot of rules, and they do not see the benefits. This is something we should not repeat in the Net Zero Industry Act by saying clearly there should be some social standard, clear consultation, and clear benefits for the local population as part of the condition to state aid this. But I'm happy to have this discussion. You understand it's not a certainty I have, but it's a direction that I think is worth exploring together.
Thank you very much, Stéphane. So if I understood you right, you're in favor of using state aid as long as the criteria are set right. So if certain projects fulfill green and social standards, then state aid should be awarded. I think in the debate, one of the
sorry, Philipp,
Philipp,
just to clarify my thought, I think what is important is that those social and environmental standards are set at EU level. So maintaining and reinforcing the single market, not to create a kind of patchwork of stated rules decided by national authority and on which the EU industry may not position very easily.
I think this is also what the Commission currently is looking at, to have, of course, state aids, rules that apply to everyone. But I think that the issue here that is sometimes highlighted is that state aid is highly uneven, that you have two countries especially dishing out state aids more than others. 80% of state aids, for example, in the past year have been distributed by Germany and France. And this, of course, creates a problem for if you want to have a level playing field in the single market. And since the single market, as we all know, has been very important, as Mr. Gambs also has already highlighted, given us so much more in efficiency or also prosperity and competitiveness. This can also be it's said to be a dangerous development. So I'm now turning also to Hubert to talk about that, because I think there's a lot of at stake when it comes to this issue, because this is also about the very being of the single market, and how can we square that with having, of course, an industrial policy, a green industrial policy that has to react, of course, to international pressures, that has to react to very high goals that are articulated in the Green Deal. But how can we connect that with a functioning single market?
Thanks, Philipp. Stated, or more broader said, public support, it's another pillar of the Green Deal industrial plan as we set it out, because it's clear that companies need a certain level of support in certain cases to be innovative, to develop, to be able to dare to develop new production methods, for example. So stated, I think, or public support is part of the picture, but in the single market, it's of course crucial that we maintain a level playing field, and therefore also stated control has its continued role to play. And this means, we were over the last 3 years really in very extraordinary circumstances. Still, we have maintained a stated control to balance it out. It's also a fact that the pockets of some member states are deeper than the pockets of other member states. And that's why there is also the need, when we talk about access to finance or public support, we keep that in mind, that member states should have certain possibilities, but also the union, we have to level it out. There are situations where the union has to level it out, and therefore we need also public support at the EU level. And I think there is, for example, for the Green Deal, there's quite a lot available. The Recovery and Resilience Facility, Next Generation EU, is an unprecedented pot of money for what? To a very large extent for the green transition towards more sustainability. And on your point, Stéphane, about additional conditions for stated, first of all, I think we need for the net zero technologies, we need not only proven technologies, we need also some space for innovation, for trying out things, because only that way we will further get develop technologies that are even better for the environment, or are the best for the environment. I agree that we have to ensure social acceptability by the population of these products, of these projects. That is important, and we in no way in the Net Zero Industry Act, in the proposal, say we want to limit this participation. There are rules that of course have to be respected. There have to be environmental impact assessments. What we also see is the need, because one of the problems that companies in the EU have, and they are, now we see it also, they're lured into, for example, to invest, if they have the possibilities, do I invest in the United States? Do I invest in Europe? If companies have these possibilities, well, then they get, calls from governors of US states that say, we don't only have money for you, but we also say that, we give you a permit in a question of months, which unfortunately in the European Union is not the rule. So that's why we say we have to also take measures to have the permitting process, not lower the standards, but having the permitting process faster, to give more predictability for companies, so that they have also in their investment decisions, not just say, well, if I go there, it takes me a few months. If I invest in the EU, it takes me a couple of years. We have some work to do there. I would like to also mention a reaction to a few points. Eva earlier already mentioned, the importance of trust in a single market. This is really a crucial aspect. Companies need trust in the regulatory framework. When they take their investment decisions, they need predictability. Consumers need to be able to have this trust when they, that the products that they acquire are no risk for their safety, no risk for their health. And standards, as you have said, Eva, standards play a crucial role in that. And I would say there is no contradiction between regulation and standards. Standards, as you have said, in the new legislative framework, standards are a key technology. Well, instrument, a key way to how we do legislation, how we do regulation, by saying, by harmonizing certain things, and then give mandate CENELEC and other organizations in developing standards to have the level playing field in the single market. So I would say it's regulation standards is a method. That's the word I was looking for. A method for regulating, and I think a very useful one. Consistency is key. We are faced with situations that we don't always manage. I claim that we try in the Commission when we put a proposal forward to ensure consistency. We might not always 100% be successful, but then we have also what is important. We keep that consistency, or try very hard to keep that consistency during the legislative process. And then, because Daniel, you mentioned Article 19 of the Net Zero Industry Act, and also Stéphane mentioned public procurement and green procurement. And there I would like to clarify that the public procurement rules, the directive as they exist now, give every public authority the possibility to take into account green criteria or social criteria. There's nothing in the directives that would stop a public authority to do that. Now, we also have to face the facts, of course, that public authorities normally deal in a situation of a limited budget. So that's where their interest comes from, of course, to look also very much at the price. And therefore, the directives have this possibility. You can look at price, you can also have green criteria, you can have social criteria also. The step, and I think a very important step that we did in the Net Zero Industry Act, was that we say the price alone is not sufficient, because the price alone would not give us what we also other objectives that we want to achieve: production in the EU, more resilience, less dependency from other parts of the world, because producing in the EU, as a rule, as a quite general rule, will always be more expensive than producing in some other parts of the world. And so in the Net Zero Industry Act, we said, you must not look only at the price. You must look at the most economically advantageous tender. And from the possibility in the directives, here we make the step to the obligatory looking at sustainability criteria, and also resilience criteria. And resilience in that aspect, in that respect, is very much the security of supply. And security of supply is, well, bigger when we produce in the EU. It's bigger when we use raw materials that are available in the EU. There might be possibilities for mining in the EU. There is certainly a big possibility for recycling in the EU, to use raw materials that are already in the EU, use them more than once. And what the 10% that you mentioned, this means, if the price difference became too big, then we don't impose to the public authorities to take into account these resilience aspects, or this sustainability aspect, to the same extent as if the price difference is not so big. Because if it's the price difference, we don't want to prohibit public authorities from at the end also taking, of course, the price into account, but they have also to use sustainability and resilience criteria when they take their decision which offer to accept.
Thanks very much, Hubert. We're already nearing the end of the event, so I would like to now give everyone in the audience the opportunity to ask questions to the panel.
Course. And may I ask a very naive question, because we had this debate on the future of the European single market now, and well, that turned into a debate on regulatory affairs, right? 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting with people from the Center for American Progress in the US that did the background on the Inflation Reduction Act. And what I found quite intriguing there was, well, with the IRA, yes, we have the whole debate on industrial subsidies, etc. But we also have a narrative that frames a social cohesion in transition. And we never touched up on that in this debate. And I wonder a little bit, are we actually falling short of having a compelling narrative for the future of the single market by just focusing on state aid, on regulation, and not really have a story to tell here?
Who would like to reply to this?
Well, Philipp, if I may, Stéphane speaking, but sorry, just want to say that being a green NGO representative, I would say we have the narrative. And I'm sorry if you misunderstood what I tried to explain. We have the narrative that we have the possibility through consistent and well-designed policy to secure that an energy-intensive industry will remain and even possibly thrive in Europe. And that's the main message. I think we have a message where we can say there is no intention for us to get rid of our energy-intensive industry or even innovative industry. And by setting some clear policy, balancing level playing field through what type of product can enter into a market and some form of market incentive through green public procurement or clear rules for public money support, we can create these conditions. So I think the narrative is here. And I'm sorry if you have not understood them properly from what I tried to explain. I wanted to react because as green NGO, in a way, some people do not identify us as the people that have this kind of also industrial perspective. And I think, in fact, it's maybe a misconception.
I think Daniel wanted to come in, or Hubert.
No, I think the narrative is definitely there. So single market at 30, single market at 60. Look forward to many more years of harmonizing legislation. And unfortunately, maybe there are some challenges now, but we have to look forward. But what's right in front of us is also what much of the legislation is in front of us now might remain in the future. So we need to get things right. And I think getting legislation that is harmonized is in everybody's interest. It's in the interest of the NGOs, as Stéphane just mentioned. And it's also in our interest. And there is a risk to push things and go forward and not look for the European solution. But the single market is, I would say, the main proof of how effective the European Union is when we work well together. And that's what we need to keep in mind going forward, to keep on finding common solutions to the problems that we're facing. Thank you.
You know, the single market in itself is not the objective. The objective is to have for the European citizens in Europe an area where they, have a good life. Let me call it like that, and live in a healthy environment. Having high social standards respected, and having also jobs. And for jobs, you need companies that see opportunities. And the single market is very much about creating opportunities, not only for companies, also for the citizens, with many measures of the single market were to create benefits for the citizens. But also, it's part of the single market that we can work abroad, that we can study abroad, that we can live abroad. These are all aspects of the single market. And, it's not perfect, the single market, but we always have to work on it. But that it is for the good of the citizens, that we have to try to get it more across. We try to put it very clear in in the single market communication at 30 to take stock where we are, but also where we see the single market develop. And there is the environment there is the competitiveness of companies there's innovation there, and there is also of course high social standards that we want for the good of the citizens.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very nice conclusion to this policy dialogue. We're already at the end. I would of course like to let Eva also say something, but I think unless you have something really pressing on your mind, you're welcome to do that now.
Thank you very much for giving me this possibility. Actually, yeah. I very much agree with what Daniel and Hubert said. Yeah, with the single market, it's like with the other aspects of the life. We are not, the citizens not necessarily need to be aware that the benefit of the single market. I mean, we as a politicians or in industry or different groups, etc., we are maybe more aware. The citizens may be, I'm not saying that there is, but maybe less aware of that. But as long as it exists, we all benefit. So we should protect, we should develop, we should improve, but we should take care of the single market, because I think it's the great value of the European Union. And with this, I would like to finish my intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eva, for these concluding words. I think, yeah, this is really to just again underline the importance of the single market, and yeah, we are looking towards the challenges ahead that are not little, but at 30 years, I think the single market has overcome quite a lot already. So I think the future should be approached in that spirit. And yeah, I would like to thank the whole panel for making it here. I've been personal online. It's been a very much of a pleasure to have every one of you here, to include your views and your arguments. And I hope it was very interesting also for the audience here present at the EPC, but also online. I wish you a good way home and a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.